It's the Dev Friday Show with Mark and Tim.
It is the Dev Friday Show, and I forgot to hit record, Mark. Can you believe it?
I can believe it. Actually, Tim, I can't believe
playing something in the background. What is going on here? I got to mute something. Oh, that's the problem. That's the problem. This is it's about par for the course, right? 95 episodes in. You think we know how to do it, right?
Absolutely not.
But we don't know how to do it. We don't know how to do it at all. I think I got it. I don't know. Is that your cat? Or is that my child?
It's my cat.
Which
acts like a child in the morning. All this cat does is like walk around and whine.
Because
it's worse than a child.
We've got I've got so many episodes I have not yet mixed. So I was trying to figure that out before we started the show. So I still had one track unmuted, so I could hear myself in one ear, I could hear you in the other. There was a cat or child in the background. I had no idea what was going on. So anyway, good morning, Mark. This is what is this? Is this we call it Dev Friday, but it's like Dev some Fridays.
All I know, it's like Dev too early on a Friday for me.
Occasionally. Okay. Okay. Yeah, but don't you have meetings or something now that you work a real job?
Interesting. Fridays for the past couple of weeks have been a little bit lighter. So
yeah,
I've been working a lot. I've been super busy with the project I'm working on, but I've been fortunate that the meetings kind of tail off towards the end of the week. And so actually this Friday is pretty open. So
nice.
Yeah.
Do you struggle to get work done amidst meetings?
It's interesting. I'm not good at like switching context. So if I'm working on something, then I have a meeting, then I have to go back to work on something. It does take me a little bit to kind of get back. That's why meetings is kind of a productivity killer, especially for me, because it just takes me a little bit to kind of get back in the flow and to get back working on it. But that's why I've been honest too with my boss and kind of the guys I'm working with, and so that and honestly, I'm not the only one that feels this too. The fact that, so if you're working on something like a big project, they try to limit the amount of meetings you get pulled into, because you know how it is, especially with a remote company. You could, everybody wants to know your opinion. Is this possible? Can we build this?
I mean, yeah, we can build it.
Yeah, we can build it.
We could always build it. Yeah, of course we can build it. I mean, but it's something that you're just thinking up in your mind. Can it be built? Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Of course it can be. How long? Those are different questions.
So to try to limit those types of meetings where like those brainstorming type of, is this possible meetings? So, yeah.
Gotcha. I met this is how unprepared we are. I was so I've been trying to connect with local businesses here, and you know where I live. It's not exactly a big town, right? Live in the thriving metropolis of Hamburg, Pennsylvania. Which, I mean, we've got a Cabela's, so there's that. And I've been trying to, and I shouldn't say it that way. Like I like living here. It's nice.
Nice, yeah.
There's not a whole lot of what I want to say.
Some would say you live
traffic.
Some would say you live in the country, Tim.
Yes, it's definitely a rural area.
Yeah, it's pretty.
But I've been trying to kind of connect with what's going on locally, businesses, stuff like that. More recently, and I actually ran into at one of the companies, they have a developer who was a student of Josh Miller.
Really?
I know it.
Josh Miller reference here.
When I heard Kutztown University, I was like, so do you? Were you around there where Josh Miller was? And apparently took some classes from Josh. So
interesting.
I thought that was really an interesting. Yeah. Speaking of, anyway, it looked like you had a thought. Did you have a thought?
It's interesting. I'm just taken back by the Josh Miller reference. Which
have you talked to Josh for a while? Like we should bring him on the show.
We should. It's been a while since I connected with him. We see each other on Facebook occasionally, comment on each other's posts, but then that's pretty much about it. So yeah, it's been a while since I talked with him. So
yeah,
I miss him.
It's been a bit. You used to do all those art installations and things, right?
Yeah,
back when
Yeah, back when we were doing when I was teaching at NCC and
So was he? I mean, because there's nothing better for a podcast to do than to talk about the career and jobs of somebody who's not on the podcast. Was
exactly.
he a professor?
And most people have no context who this guy is either.
So. Right. So we're just talking about. We could be making him up. Josh Miller might not exist.
Fictitious character. I like it.
Yeah. Was he? Did he teach at NCC with you?
The back and forth.
He taught at Lehigh too, right?
He was teaching part-time at Lehigh. Interesting. Because I was going in and out of NCC teaching both as like a temporary kind of full-time faculty member and then going back.
That's right.
Doing my own thing. So we kind of bounced back and forth around each other. And interesting that when I left, he took my job. And then when I came back in, I took his job because he was leaving going to Kutztown.
Oh, really?
So yeah.
Okay.
So we kind of did a little circle dance around each other. But we always stayed connected on some level. So
gotcha.
He's a good guy.
He would do it. I'm guessing he still does. I know he had some art installations at Kutztown, like interactive. What do you call that? Installation art? What is it called?
Well, he's really big on kind of projection mapping, kind of with coding, setting up light shows that for art installations. And I gotta admit, he does stuff he posts.
It's pretty cool
stuff he posts. He travels all around the country and sometimes over in Europe, and he partners with other artists. And he does really cool installations. So,
like for him, a lot of it was that projection mapping, which I find fascinating because, and I forget what you use for it. There's some software out there, but like if you're projecting at a non-flat, I guess that's a weird way to say it, but like a non-flat surface, right? So it's like you have some edges protruding and stuff like that. They'd actually map the projection so it like hits those edges in such a way. So it doesn't bend it actually warps the image that's projected. So as the light wraps around those protruding edges, it looks correct and it looks, well, whatever you want it to look like, as opposed to just, oh, look, that's weirding ripply because it's, the project. And I don't know, I just found that stuff fascinating because wouldn't they use multiple projectors too, like from different angles? And
yeah, absolutely. You definitely can.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I don't remember the software because my colleague Jason Zulli. I was thinking about that. It's been a while since I talked to him too. In fact, like he was also into that. And I saw some of the software used. I can't remember the name of the software, but yeah, it was actually pretty cool. Where it basically would be like almost like a 3D modeling application where you basically would define your shape. You start with an image, and then you'd basically manually. I think that has like auto mapping. It'll look at the image, then it'll kind of deduct kind of where like the rectangles are in a sense so it can start to do the mapping, and then you can kind of manually kind of tweak it. Sort of like also it's kind of like rotoscoping, if you know a little bit about that. So you can kind of like mask out a certain area. So it's kind of what you would do. You define like the edges like you're talking about of the buildings, and then to be able to find almost like it is like a 2D representation of it. So it's not like a 3D model that you can kind of rotate in a 3D space, but it's basically, it gives you a way to define where the angles and the like you talked about, those edges are, so they can map something from in a 3-dimensional space.
Because it's got to be so complex too, because it's not like you're just painting the object. You need to then know where your projectors need to be placed, but also the constraints of you don't know where your projectors can be placed.
Yeah. So it's something I never got into, but it was interesting. Yeah, just kind of interesting to see what Jason and Josh were doing and how they were, with their art installations and doing the projection mapping. So I thought it was fascinating too.
I don't know, what I find very fascinating about it is not only are they, well, they're doing crazy things with projectors, but like I've always said, what are the two hardest things to do with computers is hook up your laptop to a projector. Like literally, like you see, like anytime you go to a meeting, somebody's like, "Oh, let me just put this presentation out," and I say it like, it's like you go to a tech conference. Like, what is the hardest thing to do in the world? Yeah. Apparently, connect your laptop to a projector, and then the second hardest thing is to print something. How hard is it to just act, like figure out to connect to your printer and do this and do that, and it's just it's ridiculous. Which brings me to something I want to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
And you had asked me for what would be the, was it like entry level 3D printer? Because like if printing things in 2 dimensions on a piece of paper is hard, then we should try 3 dimensions. We should try that. So
yeah, 3D printer's been around for a long time, and I've never taken the leap to actually get one for the home. And I'm thinking like, maybe it's about time.
Have you printed stuff though? Like have you worked with them? 'Cause I know like when we're doing LB Tech stuff.
with we had a 3D printer at the school that we're starting to use, and then at the Fab Lab at NCC, they have a bunch of 3D printers that we've used. So I've done like a little bit of just kind of playing around with them, but it's not something I really like. You do more from a prototyping aspect of, you know,
Right,
you have
right.
like an idea you want to think you could actually make into solve a solution that you have, which that started to make me think about why I wanted to have one, because the reason why I came up with this like really stupid weird idea, because I was like, I have, you know, I'm into watches now, Tim, so I have a
You're
little
into watches now.
well, I told you about this kind of, you know,
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
the manual watches, and I kind of like I like them. So I have about like 10 or 12 watches, and there's one watch that I have that I really love, but it doesn't fit me perfectly. So like when I put it on, it kind of just moves a little bit, you know, especially when you adjust like the links. I wish you could have like maybe one smaller link that I could kind of have onto it that I could remove or add to it, so I could kind of just make that like a finer adjustment. So it doesn't fit me perfectly, but you know what it could happen if I wanted to kind of just add a little bit of space between like the watch and my hand, like behind like the face, the back of the watch, have like a little bit of space there. That would make the watch fit perfectly. So why can't I print that? Like, why can't I like print like a little spacer that I can get just kind of stick to the back?
Yeah.
And that would be a perfect use for a 3D printer. And I think of that type of idea, like, oh, you know, if that would actually make sense if I had a printer that could kind of just, you know, not in terms of like printing a bunch of like toys or a bunch of little gizmos that I want to kind of like fool around with. But if I actually had a problem, which I have, like I have a little, you know, a watch I want to wear, but it doesn't fit me ideally. I don't want to create like a piece to it that I could kind of make it fit better on me. Then that would be a good reason to have one, you know, just have like an access to kind of make like a, you know, solve my own problem.
Yeah. Yeah. You probably want to use like TPU for that or something that's flexible, right? Because a rigid, well, I don't know. It's not like the watch's back isn't rigid to begin with. You know, so I guess that it's just like what textures you might have on that, you know, how abrasive they might be. TPU would also help it from moving because it'd have a little bit of I don't want to say it's sticky, but it's rubbery in its texture. So it would, you know, but it might not breathe the way you want it. Yeah, no, that's definitely like using that for prototype stuff for sure.
But that kind of made me just think about, oh, you know, little solutions like that, you know, I might think about, you know, going look on Amazon. And actually there are people on Amazon who sell that, what I'm exactly talking about, little spaces that you can put behind your watch face. And then the reviews say they break down, they fall apart because they're made out of like styrofoam or something like that, or some type of foam material. And so I thought, well, instead of like buying a solution that somebody else has made on Amazon, well, why can't I just make it myself with a 3D printer? So got me to start thinking about it. So I've not taken the leap yet.
Okay.
I did some I did like some of the suggestions you make. You gave me two options. One was more kind of like an open kind of format.
Okay, so yeah. So I think I sent you the A1, which is non-enclosed.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's why I would initially talk to you about, because you have basically two styles of printers that you suggested. One would be kind of an open model, like everything's kind of out in the open. You know, basically has like the metal fixtures and the supports and everything, and the printer head would kind of, it's all out in the open. And then you have one that's kind of basically an enclosed box. So what's kind of the pros and cons of those two different styles of 3D printers?
That's it. That's a really interesting question. I don't know, honestly, what the pros for the unenclosed ones are, other than probably affordability is my guess, because you don't have to worry about an enclosure. Because there may be some filaments that you don't want as regulated temperature or as warm temperature when you're printing them. So there's where the enclosure works against you, but you could open the door. Like, it's like there's nothing stopping you from venting it more to regulate the temperature. And it's on the new.
So what happens? Well, what happens when temperature becomes an issue? That's an issue I never thought about. So when temperature becomes an issue with 3D printing?
Well, yeah, it's and here's where I am not I am firmly in the consumer of 3D printers, right? Like, I'll use them. I try to understand how they work, but I am a big fan of things like Bamboo's printers, because you don't have to fiddle, you don't have to know, you don't have to, you know, do all the modifications and tests and calibrations. It just pretty much works out of the box. And that's where I want to play in this landscape, because I just want the tool to work. I don't want to have to make the tool work, right? Because I view it as a tool, not as a hobby that I want to, you know, make my and yeah, I guess I could say I could build a 3D printer one day if if I wanted to. And I didn't have to build my first 3D printer. I assembled it because it was the the classic Ender 3. But all the things you have to fiddle with just to get a good print, I don't want to fiddle with. I just want it to print. So the reality is, for most of the buy the X1C, most of the time it just works. You don't have to worry about anything else. So there's no fiddling that you have to do. But and for opening or closing, sometimes I open the door if it seems like I should. So you're asking about the temperature. I'm going to say things. This is just that was a really big disclaimer to say. I may say something that someone who knows a whole lot more goes, "That's dumb, Tim." Okay, but you're saying temperature. You got to heat the filament up so you can melt it, right? But then it also has to cool enough so it adheres to itself. So if you keep it too warm, you may have finish problems. You may have stringing where the filament's not getting cool enough fast enough, whereas the head moves. I'm not quite sure what all the things are that happen if your chamber temperature gets too warm. But it's gonna be either finish quality or layer adhesion, things like that. You can definitely tell, like if you run out of filament, you can usually see those bands. It's like, oh yeah, that happened. Sometimes even I was watching someone talk about design, and they were printing something that was cylindrical, but it had to have a hollow recess underneath it. And if you're going to do that, you need support material. And they were finding that their finish texture on the exterior of the object changed when they stopped printing the support material, just because of the time it took to print the layer. So if you think about it, it was whether or not it made a material difference, like a strength of the material difference, it made a finish difference. Where if it had, where the layer time was longer, where it took longer for each layer, it had more time to cool. And where it didn't, once they got past printing all that support material, it just looked different. So you could see a noticeable band. And it may not have been any structural problem with the print. It looks different because you were printing over material that was a certain temperature, and now you printed over material that was a higher temperature, and it made a visual difference. So some of it's just finish too, and understanding how all those things impact the quality of your print. But yeah, for pros and cons, I would say, to me, I don't see the cons behind an enclosure. And even on the new H2D from Bamboo, if I'm not mistaken, they have an exhaust vent of sorts. So they can more automatically regulate the chamber temperature to keep it at whatever you want it for your print.
Well, I do like the idea of just getting it, hooking it up, and not doing any assembling, especially as I get older. I used to be all about, you and I used to be all about putting together computers and assembling them. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that anymore. I'm just, no, don't have the time or the patience.
I did it with my
I
desktop.
don't even like to put, we talked about this. I don't even like to put Legos together. I like to look at Legos.
I like putting them together,
but I don't like putting them together. It's just the time it takes. So I would like to buy one and just kind of take it out of the box, plug it in, very little kind of assembling, and just start running with it. So I know you have to kind of run the filament into it and kind of load it, do that setup, but actually assembling the whole piece. That's why I was also thinking about the other one that's more of an open enclosure. Would there be some assembly required? They'd have to put it together and make sure it's done right. And
so, yeah, the Bamboos, there's no assembly.
Yeah, pretty much how it's contained.
Yep. You take it out of the box. I mean, yes, you got to take some screws out to things that were kind of held down for shipping that concept, but no, there's not much you have to do, and they just work out of the box. And it's like, I can see it. Like, I kind of like the idea of building one because you're like, I see how all the pieces work, but also I like it just working. And so they're different things, right? Like the building, it is, the experience of building, but the fact that you can just turn on and it works, well, that's nice. That's really nice. And you don't have to be like, I guess I didn't build that right. So, but yeah, it's been, I enjoy it for sure.
So I'm not taking the leap yet, but I am planning on at some point. I probably will get a 3D printer. When that happens, Tim, I will print out something and I will be happy to present it and to have you critique my first
there you go
print job.
There you go. And you're gonna have to design it yourself too, right? So you're gonna
Well,
have to
that
learn
also
some
I thought would actually.
CAD.
Well, that I thought would be fun too, because I used to do a lot of 3D modeling at NCC. I taught classes in 3D animation and 3D modeling, so I do sometimes get the itch to go back to that and play with some 3D models, and that would sort of kind of provide that experience of opening up what SolidWorks. I guess I would have to do because that's probably the best tool for it, right?
I
No,
don't know. Not. I
no,
mean,
not.
SolidWorks is expensive, man. At least as
Oh
far as I
well,
know.
what is the tool? Okay, that's good. Another good question. What's the software that you use then to
So I
build your
use Fusion
models?
360.
Okay. So SolidWorks isn't like I said, I did use it at the school because I guess we had a license for it.
Yeah. Schools I can see having
Yeah.
SolidWorks license
Yeah.
is, but no, Fusion 360. Fusion 360 is free for non-commercial use. They have some limits to it, but nothing that, from a 3D modeling perspective, that for building things for a 3D printer, you're probably not going to run into any of the limits. I mean, some of the
Hmm.
limits are you can't have more than 10 documents active at a time, because it's like they've got their whole cloud storage and all that jazz, right? So you'd have to archive, or I forget what they call it, but it's not like you can't go back to it, but you just have to only have 10 active projects at a time, which honestly, if you're not using it for commercial, like if you're a hobbyist, I don't see that being that big of a problem.
Hmm.
And then there's some other there's a lot of other advanced cam features that they don't have, but you don't need them for just modeling up simple stuff.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, I mean, you could use like OpenSCAD if you wanted an open source. There's Tinkercad, which is web based. I think it's just web based, and FreeCAD. There's a bunch of offerings out there, but I would say, to me, Fusion's where I would push most people. To me, it makes a whole lot of sense. You also, though, but from you and your background, you could go the Blender route.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you played with Blender?
I have Blender installed in every computer I use. Yeah, occasionally I kind of that's where I was when I was teaching my animation courses. We were using Blender for the last, I'd say, maybe 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
So yeah, because Blender's gotten really, really good. Yeah,
And
I like it.
Blender's more of the 3D modeling, like
Yeah.
you said, for animation.
So it's interesting. I could envision it being for people to use it all the time for 3D for modeling objects for 3D printing, but it's also 3D animation programs like that are not known for being very precise in the sense of you need to design something down to I don't know, have exact measurements could be a little bit off. So I don't know. It'd be kind of interesting experience to design something Blender and then have it printed out, see how accurate it'll be.
They've added some plugins recently. I don't know. I don't use Blender. Blender is too confusing. What did you think about like the learning curve for Blender? Like every time I've even started to try to think about learning it, it's been like, good luck with that. Good luck.
Well, it's interesting. I can't remember the version where they made the jump. Was a jump from, I think it was 2 to 3. The interface, the UI back in the day, I think it was Blender version 2 was horrible, and it was just I could never get into it myself. Once they went to, I think it was version 3, they totally reworked the interface. They made so if you're more familiar with, let's say, Maya or Cinema 4D, or even 3ds Max, like these other 3D animation or modeling programs, their interface started to be more user friendly, like, well, as user friendly as can be, because 3D animation programs are pretty complex. But the UI and the experience definitely leveled up. I think it was after version 3, and then it was too bad. So if you're familiar with a 3D modeling or 3D animation program, you can learn it.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's always seemed like the learning curve has seemed high to me, but then also what you can do with it has seemed very, very powerful. And recently, I think they've started to offer more things, more plugins or more tools, or I don't know exactly how they offered them, that were more useful to the CAD use case, where you could do parametric design, where you're not just like kind of drawing it, but you're saying, here's dimensions and I want to give it dimensions. I want to be able to change those dimensions, and as I change them, everything else change with it. And I've seen some kind of like demos where it's like, that's fascinating what they're able to do. Like, make a divided container, right? Like, and just say these columns, these rows, it just bounces. And so it looks very impressive for someone who knows how to use Blender. But for me, I'm like, I'm going to stick with what I know.
So one thing I wanted to ask you about, Tim, is another thing that you know a lot about, which is
always concerns me,
which is your experience with learning Python. Like, how has that been going? Because there is something that came up in the past couple of weeks, actually, the past couple of weeks at work, because we're looking to hire some new application developers. And so the discussion that was made, as we're kind of working with the staffing agency who's helping us find candidates, and as we're building out the requirements for the position and what they should know. And so we're talking about languages, platforms, libraries, or just, they're just what experience they have. And so we were kind of going back between Python, TypeScript, and the AWS CDK and everything like that. So for you as a developer learning Python, what is your impression of Python as a language?
Well,
I'm
not sure I'd say I found my zen of Python quite yet.
Okay, so that's what I would kind of see. Like, where are you at? What has been your experience learning it? And how would you compare it then to another language that you know really, really well, like PHP?
Well, those are good questions.
And I'll give you a little bit more context here. I'll give you a little more context while you're thinking about your answer, because what we're going back and forth with the developers that we're looking for, my approach has been, okay, so thinking about the languages that all of our code bases are built on, like it's basically, I'd say 70 to 80%, probably like 70, actually around 70, 60% TypeScript, because all our CDK, all our projects repos are done in the CDK, and all done with TypeScript. And then we use also TypeScript for some API work with I think I've talked about this before, with Express, and for some APIs that we have. But then all of our glue jobs, or our scripts for doing our text transformations, or for our ETL jobs, are done in Python. But so I would say probably about 20-30% of our code base is probably in Python. So if a developer coming in knew TypeScript really well, knew Python, and then also knew the CDK, then they'd be able to kind of ramp up relatively, efficiently, within our code bases, but they weren't comfortable with those three things, that would be a major issue. So I was going back and forth with one of my colleagues about, he was wanting to just look for like a Python developer, and then and kind of not have to require them to know TypeScript too, because finding a developer that knows TypeScript and Python too, and on some level with both, is kind of challenging. It's a little bit more niche. So that's why I was kind of your experience of being a developer and then learning Python, because you have to, in a sense, because you have a type of project that maybe Python was the right solution or the right language for what you're trying to do, and learning it and seeing how it works. What's kind of been that experience?
All right. So yeah, I think we talked about last week, like the vibe coding concept for me in Python, which was useful, because I don't know what to write, but when I see it, I can go, oh yeah. And sometimes I was pushing against, I think, what is Python constructs, where I didn't want to put as many things in a file as they seem to want to put, like a lot of things in a file. Me coming from a PHP concept, it's odd to see two classes in the same PHP file. You can totally do it, but because of the way auto loading works, it's just weird that you would structure things that way, except for some cases where maybe it's a test and you're putting a fixture directly in there. But even that, usually you don't do that. So that was weird. Some of the conventions were weird. For where it fit with a OS level language, because I was doing things on a Raspberry Pi and communicating with some modems, hardware, things like that. I found it very useful, and I felt okay about what I was doing, because, let's face it wasn't rocket science. I was just sending commands to a USB device over a serial port, which was also something that I wouldn't necessarily be able to do with PHP. I mean, you can do it with PHP, but it's not what it's built for. Where I'm struggling now, as we do some more things that are Lambda functions, and Python makes sense because you can run PHP as a Lambda function, but PHP, again, not designed. Honestly, I don't know if Python's any faster in terms of what I would call its cold start, right? Python may be just as slow. I just react to the notion of a Lambda function executing PHP at a cold start PHP, just like that's a dumb way to do it. We would not do it that way. That's the entire reason why we have things like FPM that exist, so you don't have to cold start PHP every single request. So it's just like, to me, it's like I'm not even thinking in that way of, oh, we could write this in PHP as well. So as I've been writing some Python things, the struggle that I have Well, let's see one. I'm not as familiar with the testing libraries that are available. I am from like in PHP. I know what to do because I am familiar with the tools that I have there. With Python, it's all new for me. So and I've not had the time to dig into what what is unit testing for Python. I don't know. I don't know what libraries are out there. I did see a couple examples that kind of said, well, this feels different than what I'm used to. It looks like Python's really okay with monkey patching and just changing the definitions of functions for tests, or at least at least the examples I was seeing made me feel like it was far more common than it is in PHP to just say, oh yeah, willy-nilly we'll change a global function to something else as a mock, which to me isn't really a mock. It's your monkey patching. Yeah. And that seemed like a more of a, yeah, we do that. And it's like PHP, no, we do not do that. The other things that I find myself missing, I know Python has types, but my understanding is they are enforced more or less. Well, I don't know where they're enforced. It doesn't seem like they're enforced. It's like they're suggestions. It's like the Pirates Code.
If they're like decoration, that's all it is.
It's like it's more of a guideline, really.
Yeah.
Where in PHP, like if I run a method, I say this argument needs this type, and I give you a different type, it's going to say, sorry, no, we're not doing that.
It's more from a tooling perspective.
Yeah, so it's like the linter would tell you.
Yeah.
But the actual interpreter would just go merrily on its way. And I feel a lack of safety there, whether it's reality or not, because if I'm linting all my code and the linter says, yep, you're good, you've not passed it anything that's not the thing you said you're going to pass it, but in a dynamic language, of which Python is, I feel like that's still loose. I could get to a place where the linter is not going to know what type this variable is, and I could pass something to a method that expects something else, and it get the wrong type. And then from a robust or defensive coding standpoint, then that leads me down this terrible path of having to check everything all the time instead of trusting that my type definitions are actually the types, which is why I really like, for as much of a bad rap as PHP gets, I find it unique, and my unfamiliarity with the details of other languages will show here. But PHP is a language that is in active development. We have gotten more and more, and we continue to get more and more things that the community goes, you know what, that's a good idea, let's bring it in. Right? Once upon a time we didn't have types.
I would agree with that. That's a real good point about PHP. And like I said, I don't do much work with that at all anymore. But like I said, I would just joke around the fact when I was actively developing 5.4 back in the day.
There's been some changes.
But I would agree with you because hearing your updates, and also just kind of following just from a distance and just kind of seeing the updates that PHP makes, how actively it's supported and how fast they are improving the language. It's pretty interesting to see how it has evolved and how quickly it's evolved.
Yeah. I don't remember where it is on the roadmap, and this is again like I've just not been as engaged with what is not what's coming, but like what is come, like what's out already. I don't think it's out yet, but I think it's been accepted. We're going to get property hooks, which is going to be something very similar to C#. Your getter setter support, where you can set. So and from a language, like it was something that was talked about. I remember, wow, how long have we known each other? 10 years? 15,
it's been more 10 years,
something like that. 12, 13 years, something like that. There was an RFC for it back then that got rejected. But as more and more in the language has grown, now we're at a point where I think it's like one of those things where, it makes sense. Since we support all the rest of these, it didn't make sense back then when we didn't have a lot of what we have now in terms of typing and just what the language could support. But we will soon get what we're calling property hooks, which is like the getter setter support of C#, where you already can say a property is read-only, private, it could be public read only. You can type it, which makes it great for constructing value objects, right? You can construct them with things, but you can't change them after the fact. So great for value objects. But what if I have a thing where I do want to set it, or when I get a value, maybe needs to have a same default if it wasn't set. Well, we can use property hooks for that instead of having to define a getter. So it's just like how the language has evolved to me has been really great, and it's active. It's not like, oh, well, it works, we're not going to change it. So I miss those things when I come back to Python, or not come back to Python. When I start working in Python, I miss some of that type safety. I miss things that I'm used to. And honestly, a lot of things that I've gotten recently sounds weird, but let's say over the past 5 years in PHP, and I find them missing, at least as far as I can see. And it could be that I'm not seeing it correctly in Python.
Well, I share your type concerns. That was one thing that really, really bothered me. Just like I said, is basically just types it's just there for the tooling. So it gives you some better linting and some better observability of, like, within the editor that you're working from. But it really is, they're really just, like I said, I think of it as like just decoration or just kind of fluff. They're on top of it because it's not enforced. So that's one big issue. Also, I find, like, my perspective about Python is that either it's like the best tool for the job or the worst tool for the job.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Okay.
And usually that's dependent upon the libraries that you need. So if the job that you are requiring has a good library, or the solution for your job requires certain libraries, if those libraries are written in Python, or you need to or to interface with Python, then I think that's probably going to be the best tool. Like for us, when we are working with our data libraries, like with PySpark or with Pandas, when we're doing our data modeling for our ETL jobs, then honestly, Python's the best solution for that. Because if we want to use those libraries for those jobs, then we want to use Python for that. But then if I remember getting into some Python projects that were object oriented, and to be able to kind of go through those projects, they were always felt like a mess, and it was just kind of hard to follow and kind of hard to kind of work with. It became very unwieldy really, really quickly, especially from an object oriented standpoint. So I don't know. It's kind of, that's why I have my own issues. That's why I prefer more of a, C based kind of TypeScript or Java or something like that has, where you have a little bit,
there's PHP too that exists. There
is. But yeah, so it is interesting. So we were going back and forth from a developer standpoint, the type of languages that we want the developer to look for. So I don't know if I also would want to hire a developer who only knew Python. That would also be a little bit of a red flag to me.
Huh. All right.
Because the other thing about Python is that it's very easy to get into. And honestly, from when I was teaching programming, I think from a language perspective, teaching it was a great experience. But I don't know if I would want a developer or would work with developers, especially on the type of code bases we have that are really heavily TypeScript based, that they only knew Python, and then kind of to make the jump into TypeScript would be a pretty big jump. So I'd be a little bit
because right, because TypeScript is object oriented, well typed JavaScript, right?
Yeah.
And I know we do, our team on the JavaScript side likes TypeScript for a lot of those reasons.
Yeah.
The safety that you get, and it's like, yeah, it's not just a theoretical thing, right? It's not just when you're reading those books, like, it's not an academic concern. It actually makes your life easier to be able to say, I know I got this thing in any, so somebody said there, that was it. The other places where I've used Python, found it useful. I liked how you said it's either the best thing or the worst thing, right? I found Circuit Python really useful, instead of having to write in a C-like language, but be able to write something that feels a little bit easier for me to understand, and then have it compile down into something. Well, and it doesn't even compile down. If I'm not mistaken, Circuit Python is interpreted on the microchip, which is fascinating. That it's, I feel like we probably lose a little bit of the, I want to say redundancy is not the right word, but with a microchip, it's like you got to you loop.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if when you start going to Circuit Python, if you lose a little bit of that because it's interpreted. But my most recent playing around with a microcontroller, I use Circuit Python. I found it nice.
The other thing I want to ask about too, because you've been working Python primarily also in your job with working with Lambda functions, right? So you gotten into that. You have a project that you were writing some
Yeah,
Lambdas for.
yeah.
So the one I don't know if did you get the notification by AWS saying they're changing their billing model with Lambdas?
I did not get that. I'm sure somebody did.
Well, I did.
What is the change?
So it's interesting the fact that like Lambdas always were really are nice because they're so cheap, right? Because you only get billed for the time that that they execute and
Right.
the time that they're running. So if you're pretty efficient with how you could, like, they're not like a long running process. The Lambdas are really great, super cheap, and we're actually looking to migrate some of our pipelines that because we're primarily a AWS Glue shop. We have most of our pipelines in AWS Glue, but the last API that I wrote for the integration was we just try to do it without any Glue jobs and just have it written just with a combination of API gateway and with our with Express and kind of in writing just using Lambda functions.
Oh, that's right, because you were running like an Express app as the Lambda function handler, right?
Which there's pros and cons of that, because when you package up an Express applications, is the package is gonna be larger than if you just would have like your Lambda functions just as your individual Python scripts that would be connected to your endpoints and to run from there. But and also you have like if you're going to be packaging up in an Express application, then it could also be like a single point of failure. So there are downsides of doing that. So I know it might not be the best solution for everything, but for what we were doing, I thought it was a pretty good solution. But I was just thinking about AWS did change the billing model, because one of the other things we're looking to go for is to do more event driven, running more Lambdas, and see if we could use Lambdas for doing some of our data processing instead of just relying on Glue jobs, because Glue jobs are expensive. Because then you get charged per worker.
Yeah, I remember looking at that, and we were surprised by how much more expensive Glue jobs were.
It could definitely start to get up there, and so we're starting to feel that a little bit, because especially as we scale up our jobs, and then we're thinking about, okay, is there other ways to do this, or maybe is it not the right solution for every single pipeline that we have, and maybe we could use Lambdas. But I just did see this notification just by AWS yesterday, how they're changing the billing model, because before they would only charge you if your Lambda function was running or was being shut down, right? So there's different phases. You have like your net phase where it's being initialized, like that's like your cold start, where it's being kind of the Lambda, that process being booted up and the library is being loaded in and it's getting ready to run. You have your execution phase, where it's actually being executed, and then you have your shutdown phase. So you're always billed on the execution or the invoke. I think it actually invokes phase. So you invoke, and then the terminating phase, where the Lambda is being terminated. So you're billed for that, but you were never billed for the init phase, like where it's actually being booted up in cold start. But they're changing that now, so you will be billed for the init phase.
Another 2 seconds sometimes,
so
or whatever.
If you have a Lambda function, like I said, in my case too, we're using Express, or you're kind of using some libraries or framework, and you're packaging up an application that's running in a Lambda, that the cold start or that init phase could take longer maybe than you would like. Well, you're going to start getting billed for that. So I think that's kind of interesting how AWS has started to change their billing model. It's trying to squeeze a few more pennies out of the each Lambda function. So I wonder how that's going to affect people. So what have your experiences been when you're writing your Lambdas when it comes like cold starts or packaging libraries?
Ours are pretty simple, right? Because we're just using Python, and the approach that we took for like the solution for that you used Express for, I think our solution right now would be more of a SAM application with a assortment of handlers. Yep. So multiple Lambda functions that may or may not share a layer that's also part of the SAM definition. And we just deploy it all as one. So for that, I don't think we're going to have a whole lot of cold start issues. I was trying to figure out why some API gateways just seem to run slow. And I don't know, through some testing, I found I don't think it was the cold start. I think it was however we were connecting to the database or something we were doing was just slow.
Okay. Yep. Which can be. Yeah, which that's the experience too. When I worked with the Express, you're running an Express app through a Lambda function. From a boot up standpoint, it wasn't slow too. Now, different experience when I talked about this before, running Next.js. Never try to run Next.js.
You said it took forever, right?
I built a small client-side application for a client just to kind of manage some data in I think it was DynamoDB. And I was like, okay, the quickest way for me to kind of run this, let me just throw up a Next.js application. I could couple screens just to do it quick as possible. But then I was like, oh, okay, I could kind of run that inside of a Lambda, just kind of be super cheap, right? Because the client's only going to want to access this for like maybe once a day, right? And they're only going to use it for like a couple minutes, right?
For 5 minutes, and then they can see the page.
I know. It was just a couple of screens just to edit a little bit of data. And then I didn't realize after I got it online, I was like, wow, this actually takes a bit of time to kind of get started up. And then he would actually let me know, like, is the application down? I was like, well, just did you wait like a minute or so? Because what would happen, he would just begin waiting for it to kind of like the screen just be blank. It would just be loading. And it would be because that especially if he's only accessing once a day, it has to have a cold start because the that instance or that for that Lambda function just doesn't exist. That's probably not the best solution for it.
Right, because you were using Next.js to do server side rendered pages that you would be pushing down, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Now, I can't like if I don't know the cutting edge of what's going on in PHP and when it's being released, there is zero chance that I know what is going on with JavaScript frameworks, because there's always another one.
There always will be, Tim.
Was Next
just
one of those?
Just like death and taxes, there will always be JavaScript frameworks.
So, I was going to make it. It's too late now. It's too late now. I was going to ask if the AWS Lambda on the cold start, is that due to the tariffs? But
maybe it's affected everyone, Tim.
Who knew those servers were being imported? But anyway, that's what takes so long, is we have to wait for the server to be delivered and then turned on. No, but Next.js, did that have that concept of you could have both a client side app and the server side app, and it kind of work together? Because that seems like it could have been a solution if you had the kind of the client side UI loaded through S3. It could pop up and you could hit a button, and it could even give you something and be like, "Hey, just wait, we're doing our
you could do like
booting up."
I like the model that it provides, where like if you want to just the quickest way for if you got to say host application S3, you could have it built to just be basically a static application and then hydrate that application with like API calls and to pull the data in after the fact. Or you could turn on the option for it being server-side rendered, so it'd be more like a PHP application,
right?
So it'd be rendered on the server, returned. Or you could have a mix of both. And so I kind of like the flexibility of that, because when I was starting on a project, like I would usually kind of start, okay, let me just build it as a static application, host as S3 just to get it up there. But then if it makes sense for certain parts of the application to start being statically rendered, now once rendered server side, once you do that though, then you have to think about, you can't host on S3 anymore. Then you have to run it in a container, which that's what I was basically doing in a Lambda function, basically booting up a built container that I had for this application and running it through the Lambda function. But you need some type of runtime to run that container and for an Next.js application. So it does provide a little more requirements. Like if you're going to use like ECS or Fargate or some type of environment that you can run as a containerized application, then you could do that from a server-side perspective.
I guess maybe I'm thinking of was it React? I thought just one of them had this idea where it could work in either context almost seamlessly. Like if you did a server-side render page, you could come down and then the app was running locally and making API calls.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seemed like if, you might be able to pull off the Next.js Lambda function if part of it.
No, please don't.
No, but
don't never do that.
If part of it was hosted in S3, so you could at least show the client, you could at least show a UI.
Mm.
And you could like see, oh, it's up, and now I try to do something, and there's this little like, hey, we're what is it, reticulating all the splines or whatever?
Yeah,
whatever.
No, that would
games pop up.
That would have been a better solution, to have it built as a static application, just hosted on S3, and then just run some. If I use Express or even another, well, I don't think I would not build an API in Next.js, just only being an API, but using like API gateway to then that it would interact with and to pull the data in. That probably would have been a better solution. But I was just kind of getting up and running in a weekend, throwing in one application.
Gotcha, yeah,
that was basically the UI and the data functions for pulling the data in was basically all built in one application, just to kind of get it up and running.
Yeah, I can't remember what framework I'm thinking of, but there was something that seemed like it almost made that easy to say, like, oh, stop server-side rendering this. Instead, here's, I don't know what it did. It would expose the API automatically because it's like, oh, this is the data that you're using to hydrate this. So I'll just, but I can't. I don't remember. I don't remember which it was. So.
But just a word of warning: just be careful about that init phase, Tim. You're gonna get started build for it. So
I don't think that's a lot for us right now, honestly, because we're pretty lightweight when it comes to that, and I think I think that's where it's a good fit for us. We'll see.
Yep.
But that it feels like the right solution when it is very simple to boot it up. It's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense as a Lambda function. When there's lots of complexity, I start to wonder, like, that feels
so. Where
I find it hard time is like testing it. I'm just struggling to,
Another thing that we're working on, which I wanted to ask you about, because your shop, you're very heavily MySQL, right? With your databases. And you have basically one big database, or maybe a series of databases, but you don't have that many databases that you work from. And
I don't think we have as many as you do based on our conversation.
Well, that's the reason why I'm asking is because we're also kind of prototyping another solution using a relational database, like using Aurora on AWS. So we're thinking about, just like I was talking about, thinking about some of our pipelines and making them more event driven and less dependent upon our glue jobs. We're also, because we are very heavily S3 based from our data lake, and we have our glue databases on top of that, so we can then do our, accessing the data with Athena and with some of our APIs that we could interact with. But we're prototyping something for a solution that we're working on, using Aurora. We haven't decided which database we're going to use, either Postgres or MySQL. But it's interesting to, I just want to kind of your experience for an AWS. So are you hosted on our RDS as a MySQL instances, and you host that on AWS?
No. We do it on an EC2 instance.
Oh, so you hosted directly. So why? Okay, that's a good question. So why do you prefer to go that route instead of like the RDS managed route?
This is me pausing to say, like, I don't know what I should say, and also my understanding of
pros and cons. Yeah,
for us, it was like the scale that we were at. I mean, because all what is it, RDS?
Yeah, but that's
it's managed.
It's the managed servers.
The way they managed it didn't work for us.
Got it.
Like, it just, like, we needed to twist the knobs and check the boxes in a different way than we could because of the scale of data we were holding. Anyway, so
interesting. Yeah, because we're prototyping something with Aurora serverless, and we're kind of seeing that's going to be a good solution for some of our data or some of our pipelines that we're working through. So it's interesting. But yeah, we're not going through the route of hosting it on an EC2 instance with which I've done that too in the past, running your database server off of EC2, and then keeping like your database server separate from your application server. And I've done that before too.
Yeah, and I think there may be things that we do with our data in the future to make it better. Like, it may be better for us to have data in such a format that we could run it on RDS. So that might be a thing for us to, think about as we going forward. But we start off the show talking about Josh Miller. I don't know if you could you get to see the chat in your view of Restream?
I know that. I ignore all chats if I can.
Okay, so here we have Anthony Durante saying hi guys from LinkedIn. So look at that.
She's streaming on LinkedIn. We bring in our old friends here.
Yeah, this is LinkedIn. LinkedIn apparently is where it's happening now. Apparently it's the social network I didn't realize was one.
Hey, if I'm looking for a job, I'm right back on LinkedIn.
Are you looking for a job, Mark? Because this is how we started this thing.
I know.
95 episodes ago.
I usually start anything when I'm looking for a job. I think, okay, what can I do? Let me start up like a local networking group. Let's see if I want to try to find a job or start a startup, or if I'm trying to network. But yeah, LinkedIn was good. It was helpful for me to network and find a job. So I'm not looking for one now, but who knows in the future? We'll see.
Always keep those.
I made to start paying for that LinkedIn Premium again. So.
We got 5 minutes left, something like 5 minutes left. Do you know what's happening later on this month, Mark?
I think that there's probably a conference.
I feel like we ended last show, which is so hard for me to keep track of when
that
last
we
show
always
was.
talk about.
Yeah?
I never go to.
You never go to. You should go though.
I should go, but I
You
don't do
should go.
anything with PHP.
That's
but,
okay. The community is very welcoming.
I get the sense of that.
Do you like board games?
I love board games.
That is pretty much what happens every night.
Okay.
Like people break out the board games. There's like, have you ever played Settlers of Catan Space Edition?
That. Oh, the Space Edition. No, I love Settlers of Catan, but never played the Space Edition.
There's usually a space edition going off on one table. Mm-hmm. Probably got your regular old Settlers of Catan going to someplace else. You know, there's there, yeah. No, every night. So you should come just for that. That alone is worth it.
I do have some vacation time built up.
What in the world? This is happening, guys. This is happening.
Like I told you, it's like if I can give me a free ticket, I'll bunk with you, and I'll get my butt over there.
Not sure either one of those things is going to be possible this time because I'm taking my daughter with me. So I think
oh, really? So is she going to be part of the conference?
She's just
going
to see what it's like.
Oh, interesting.
So, but yeah, if you go to tech, I gotta look at it, make sure I get this right. I think it's if you go to phptech.io is where you can get your tickets. But we ended last time in the 4 minutes we have left now talking about, I think, my testing talk.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which seemed like it was an intriguing concept. The value of tests versus just like what type of test it is.
Yep.
And so quick question then for you, what from your perspective makes the test valuable, or the flip side too? And this is what I really am excited to explore. What doesn't make it valuable, or what are the things that make a test less valuable? Because if we could take those away, that will also help us.
So it's interesting too, because we did hire a new QE engineer, and what his job is to basically go through. We have one library that we use, which is for most of our ETL jobs and most of our Python code is in, and that's where most of our tests are located. We don't have good tests now for our APIs. Like he actually is helping us. The latest API that I wrote, like he built a test framework around that, so that was useful to kind of test the shape of the response. So we can kind of run that locally and be able to kind of just to test like the response of the API. I would say my experience of looking at the test, if you're trying to test every single thing, in a sense, like every single data point that's kind of flowing through, and you have to maintain that, maintainability of the test gets to be an issue.
Okay.
Where
so
as
what
a
you're
developer,
saying is a hard to maintain test makes the test less valuable.
Because then I won't want to actually edit the test.
Right.
It's just more work, right?
Yeah.
So So finding that balance of, I think we talked about it before, of are you testing the right things? You know, is if you are, and also if that experience of keeping that test maintained is a good experience from a developer standpoint, then I think it's a good thing to have, because once the tests become unwieldy, where you're almost like because especially when you look at mock data, because we have like mock data files that are big JSON files we load in to kind of simulate the inbound data that's coming through, and they're huge files, and for us to then go and edit those files is a big pain. And so let's say if one of our partners that we have data coming through, and we have a mock file of that data, and that they change like the structure of that data, then we have to go and change the mock file, and then go to edit this big file, and then also change the test that's looking at the data from that mock file. It's just a bad experience. So like I said, it feels like we're almost like, and he agrees, like we're testing not the right things. We're almost testing too much. I mean, kind of make it a little more focused, so it could be a better experience, and also make it more valuable for the actual our pipelines that we have.
I feel like I'd have to see some of that data a little bit to understand it, because to me that feels like if your partner's changing their data feed, essentially, you wouldn't want to edit the mock data. You just want to be like, here's new mock data. Oh, but is it because then you're making predictions on actual values?
Yes, because we would transform that data. Yep.
Bob Smith, and now their new one is it's Alice Smith, and something's saying it should be Bob, and now it needs to say it's Alice. And
because we would have, what we do a lot is we have data coming in that we look for specific values, and then we map those values to other values based on how we want those stored. And so if the values change that are coming through, then we need to know about that change that test.
Yeah, still feels like I mean, the test probably has value because you need to make sure the output is what the input, like the data feed from your partner. But yeah, how to make it more maintainable, that's going to increase your value for sure. So yeah, we'll be talking about that at PHP Tech, Mark. And
when is
that? You'll be there. You'll be there. Is that what I hear?
I'll be there in spirit, Tim. If you're streaming it, are the talks being streamed? Maybe
yeah, you can get it. You can get a streaming ticket. It's May 20th through May 22nd in Chicago, the great city of Chicago. The Windy City, is that with it? And deep dish pizza too. What's not to love?
So that's at the end of the month?
Yeah, middle of the month. Yeah, 22nd or 20th. Yeah.
All right. And your daughter's going with you. Are you getting her to do some PHP?
Not to do any PHP. It's just one of those things where like
she's Chicago, and you're just
it's
going
more like I want somebody other than me to go with me to these things, and like because my wife can't go because too many things going on here.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things like, hey, yeah, this is part of my job too. You can see what it's like, and I think because she's not graduating this year, she'll be graduating next year. But just like a little bit of a like this is a thing. That's a very articulate way to say it. But like conferences and that type of not just local networking, but understanding a larger community and being able to engage with a larger community of domain experts in a specific field can be useful. Wherever you find yourself, whatever you're going to do.
And she's probably going to love the board games.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Is she going to help you with a puppet presentation? Are you going to be bringing the suitcase, Tim?
I don't think there's any puppets in any of my talks this time. There was last year. The Docker talk had a puppet that showed up, but yeah.
You could actually have her as part of your act.
As part of my act. I like how it goes from a talk to an act now.
Because I could just imagine this. This is what I'm visualizing. You'd have your daughter in like kind of one of those curtained off kind of puppet kind of, what do they call that? Like the box that's usually like a curtain, usually with PVC piping, and you have like the curtain there. The puppets that stick up from it. So you could have like your daughter behind there using a puppet. You could be talking to the puppet the whole time.
I don't even know how we haven't done this already. This is such a good idea. So
that would be amazing.
Giving a presentation on event sourcing and testing, I have a conversation.
Yes.
A conversation with like, what are we thinking? Is this more Kermit the Frog or like a Bert and Ernie? Like a Big Bird? Like what? Is this Sesame Street for developers? I
have no idea what the character should be, but it could be like a Dilbert. A programmer, right?
Okay. You know what I mean? So that's more like, is that Beaker from
Beaker? Yeah, Beaker. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, he's just gonna go around saying.
So you as you're kind of doing your presentation, doing your walkthroughs, you could have like the puppet like commenting and asking questions, and you're bringing up good points so you want to discuss more. This would be amazing, Tim.
I'm not as sure as you are, but apparently Anthony thinks it'd be fun. He's on YouTube now and he's laughing at us. So that's where we're engaging with people.
I think you should add that to okay, let's plan this out. Because I did some puppet work in my past too. Maybe then I could get a ticket to PHP Tech because I could be your puppet assistant. And I could be the guy holding my arm up,
I don't know,
and asking you and sort of harassing you while you're doing your presentation.
Right. So so this is more of the what is it, Walther? I forget who are the two old guys in the Muppet Show.
Oh, the ones that would sit up on the booths.
Right. And I'll say something about, hey, and he'd be like, he thinks tests should be valuable. I don't know about that. Something. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Let this percolate, Tim. I'm telling you.
Love to know the source of these events. Something like that. I like it.
Hey, you have a couple weeks. Just talk this through with your daughter. I think she may be into it.
Yeah. Okay. We'll have to see what we can do. All right. I'll have to clip this section right here, and we'll send it over to the organizers and see what they think. So
yeah.
All right, I'm going to end the stream. Yep. For those of you watching, you get to see the bonus. This isn't in the finished podcast, which, by the way, I think I'm behind by 4. So hopefully I'll get those done soon.
Yeah,
Get
let
them
me
up.
know.
Get them up. So
Just like I need to get the website updated. So
well, one of these